Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. It is the reopening committee of the White Plains City School District. Thanks, everyone, for volunteering your time. I'm going to give a quick update to everyone, and then we'll go through and provide any new information to the committee. And I know that members of our subcommittees also have information to share. I think the first thing that is very important to say is happy holidays with Hanukkah starting tomorrow evening. Wishing everybody who celebrates a very, very happy and healthy holiday. And of course, with Christmas and Kwanzaa and New Year's right around the corner, lots to be thankful for, but also lots to consider as we think about holiday plans. The first thing is a reminder that if we're gathering, if we're doing anything that could potentially expose us to illness, that we take all of the appropriate precautions before coming back into the school facilities. That's so important. So if we're not feeling well or somebody in the household's not feeling well, please make sure that we're not coming into school because any time that we can stop potential introduction of COVID-19 into the school environment, it definitely makes it possible for us to keep moving forward without major disruptions. This week was a major disruption to many, many folks. If you got on this morning and you were going to tell me how much you hate that we're full remote this morning, you certainly can still do that, but I already know. If you got on this morning and you wanted to tell me how you think it was the best idea in the world, you can do that too, but I've already heard that also. So, I know how challenging this situation is for our families, and moving us into full remote for the additional 4 days this week was not at all a decision that I took lightly. It was predicated on exactly what I was seeing on Thursday and Friday in our school district, which was additional cases of COVID-19 coming into the buildings and making a significant negative impact on our ability to conduct in-person instruction in a quality manner, putting many folks in quarantine or isolation. Contact tracing extended through the weekend. And indeed, even when we were out in remote, you saw yesterday, or on Monday even, we still had positive cases popping up. So moving into full remote this week, not good, not happy about it, but in my mind, necessary. And my hope is that move is going to help us as we re-enter our facilities on Monday. I also heard from folks who said, "No, Rick is lying. We're going to be full remote all the way through the new year." Not at all true. We're welcoming our children back into our facilities on Monday. That is exactly the plan, as was stated last week. And hopefully we'll be able to continue pressing on into, up to the holiday recess, and then successfully as we return back in the new year. That's the goal. Believe me, anytime we move children out of the facilities, it is not an ideal situation, and certainly not something that we look forward to. Today, the governor is going to be giving another update. He's moving back to, I think, 3 a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11:30. It is possible that we're going to see additional changes to the microcluster strategy. If you just kind of in your mind went, "Oh, come on, more changes," I feel your pain. We know that whatever comes down, we're going to need to be able to operationalize fairly quickly. But at the same time, we're hopeful that whatever the requirements are not too far afield from what we've already been planning for. And like we talked about last week, we were planning for the eventual, possible or eventual designation as a so-called microcluster zone, either yellow, orange, or red, which then of course brings with it the testing requirements. We have moved, we've moved forward. We've been in close contact with the county and the state. We're ready if we need to. We're sending out our test, that is, we're sending out consent forms again for folks who maybe missed it the first time around, to be able to provide consent for screening testing. Remember, this is the testing that's the non-invasive, or certainly not as invasive as the PCR test. This is right in the nostril. And it's the screener test, not the PCR test, the rapid that comes back in 15 or so minutes. So we're preparing for that if a designation does come through.
Joe?
Yep.
May I ask a question directly related to that? And it may be moot depending on what the governor says. But yesterday in the Journal News, there was an article, State Shifts Guidance on Keeping Schools Open. And it described, the new testing protocols, right, which again may be subject to change, the most recent ones. And one of the, sections was who is required to take the testing. And it says that the state doesn't offer an opt-out option for students and staff. And students who are participating in hybrid learning or all virtual learning also are subject to the testing requirements and must be included in the school's random testing protocols, according to the State Department of Health. So for, other parents who are reading this, how do we reconcile the parental consent form and the implication that parents can essentially opt out if they're not giving permission, with apparently the Department of Health saying that everybody has to, take the test if, if we're in the zone, essentially.
Yep, and thanks, Cheryl. I saw that article too, and that's, I think, one of the major challenges that folks deal with on a daily basis is a cacophony of inconsistent messages or messages that don't have detail associated with them. So in my conversation with the governor's office 2 weeks ago, the strong recommendation was that the testing pool be of consenting students' families, as that would likely be, the less the less strenuous on the community. That said, we also went through and spoke with attorneys about, whether or not schools have the legal authority to conduct these tests absent parent or guardian permission. The legal feeling right now is that we don't. I don't know who that particular representative from the Department of Health was, but I can tell you that, if there does in an executive order come through that every in-person student is required to participate in screening testing, we certainly would follow that executive order. But absent that language and that authority, we're really trying to get as much consent as possible from parents or guardians so that we don't set ourselves up for a challenge that we don't have the authority to undertake. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Unfortunately, I guess we just don't have, absolute regulations that are being passed down at this point. So.
Yeah, and to your point, if you think about what a lift it was to actually get the requirement in place legally for vaccinations, and that, which of course is a different thing, right? Of course. But still, I think that there's some work that needs to be done on that end. But I also agree that it makes it really challenging in school districts to conduct appropriate screening if the sample pool are, you can extrapolate this out. The sample pool of folks who would likely consent are also likely or reasonably, a prudent person could reasonably assume those are folks who are taking the appropriate steps to stay safe. So right. We're going to kind of see user bias, right? In terms of the testing pool. That's why we're hopeful that parents and guardians see the value in participating in the screening process and consent, to, again, it's non-invasive. It's, the child's identity is not shared, those things, so on and so forth.
Joe, are the consents also being sent to families whose children are all virtual? Because again, the article says the pool has to include all virtual students as well.
Right. So I think that again, in that reporting, and I can't, I don't know if it's Gary, I don't know who it is. And
well,
I don't want to.
It's Joseph Spector.
I don't want to contradict Joe Spector, but again, the guidance that we've received from New York State DOH is focusing on our in-person population.
Okay.
Now, if somebody switches out of full remote and wants to come in person, we would hope that they would participate in that pool. But again, if you think about it, if we're looking for screening to try and identify potential cases of COVID-19 within the school district, increasing the pool to include individuals who don't participate in person could skew the data in such a way that, it renders it moot and not helpful at all. But yeah, very hard to get a handle on this stuff, and it changes so rapidly. So contact tracing, continues, and I know Maggie's been doing a lot of work, and we've also just reached out to the county, heard from parents and guardians, and believe me, we know this too. The cafeteria is a nightmare when it comes to contact tracing. It's one of those places where, because of the way the regulations are, you can get swept up in a contact trace investigation and potentially quarantined or isolated, and have had really no significant contact with the individual or the individuals who may have been sick. So we're working right now to ameliorate that. We're working right now to fix that. And our plan is to do it through some pretty common sense things, right? Like having assigned seats and making sure that we're being very conscious of where the children are, who the children are in the cafeteria, so that when we report issues to the Department of Health and the contact trace begins, that Maggie is able to share and our team is able to share with the Department of Health how close, right, with certainty, the other children in the cafeteria and adults in the cafeteria are, so that we don't have these wide sweeping contact traces and disruptions coming out of our cafeterias. Thanks, Maggie, for doing that. We did talk to Dr. Amler yesterday and Dr. Huang yesterday at the County Department of Health, and we're working that through to hopefully be able to not have that issue taking place in our cafeterias. What are we seeing? We're seeing the same thing that you're seeing. We're seeing identified cases of COVID-19 go up. Even in our city, we're seeing that as well. What we know is that now hospitalization rates and case positivity is going to be part, I guess, of the new calculus. Hopefully we'll learn more about that today at 11:30 and be able to share that with the committee and the community next week. Microclusters and testing are going to continue to be a thing, and we know we need to be ready for that. And in-person instruction, even despite the cases popping after the Thanksgiving holiday, we are still working to bring parents and guardians and students who wish to attend more often in person, more often in person. So while it's not going to be thousands of children at once, we are going to be able to bring more children back. The principals and their teams at their buildings have been working on that, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that this morning. The final thing that I want to share, certainly I'll answer any questions you might have, is the holidays, typically a stressful time of year without a pandemic. We know that they're going to be much more stressful this year. They're stressful for a lot of reasons. In the best case scenario, they're stressful because we've been inconvenienced. In the worst case scenario, we've lost loved ones, folks are sick, we've lost jobs, we've lost homes. There are just so many myriad things that are taking place in the lives of our children that it's so critically important, particularly this year, to really recognize that the holidays are not always a fun, carefree, and wonderful time for people. And I'm asking, and I know our teachers are working hard on this, and our administrators and support staff are working hard on this, just to be really cognizant and careful to look and see and check in on people and see how they're doing. And if they're not doing well, to reach out to somebody who can help them, direct them to somebody who can help them, but just don't let people suffer in silence to the extent that we're able. And that goes for everybody. I think it's really important for us to pull together and support each other during this time. It's going to be a hard time for many, many families. They're not going to be able to see their loved ones like they typically would, or engage in the celebrations that they typically would, for all many, many, many reasons. So just from my part, and we'll continue to remind folks, but let's be cognizant and careful and caring and loving about that. I think that'll go a long way to easing some of the stress and tension. The last thing I want people to be worried about throughout the holiday season, with all of the other things that are on their plates, is something that we could adjust and avoid or make better for them. So any questions for me before we move into the subcommittees? Great. I'm going to start off with Deb Algarten today. Morning, Deb. Muted.
Guess I'm just not a pro on Zoom. Good morning, everybody. The Social and Emotional District Learning Committee is meeting next week. My timing was a little off, and I look forward to hearing from the buildings what they're doing. But if Guy or Mike want to share out, or Laura want to share out right now a little bit about what's happening with regard to SEL, particularly on the heels of some of the reporting that came out today about a particular student, not in White Plains, but in our country, I'd really appreciate it. So Mike, I'm putting you on the spot.
No worries. Good morning, everybody. So over at Highlands, we're continuing to tackle the social emotional needs of all our students through our advisory class. Every morning we're waking up and having our kids do some type of social emotional activity in their advisory class with their teachers. We also just finished a campaign for Thanksgiving, which was really special. We were able to give out 98 full meals to families in need. So that was really great. And, I want to just thank all the staff members, all the community members that were able to do that. And we're continuing that now for the holidays, as we have over 100 families that we're targeting as well, along with a toy drive to try to get some of these kids some gifts that might need it as well. So we're continuing to look and help and support family needs as we're learning of more families that are in need. So our shift has kind of gone also to families along with the students. So we're continuing to work on it. We're going to revamp our advisory moving forward, as I've received some feedback from our social emotional committee at the Highlands level. So we're going to be shifting it to direct it more into what students need right now. So that's where we are at Highlands.
Mike, are you accepting donations from the community, or how are you getting the food? Because this would be a good opportunity for a little public service announcement.
Yeah, so our staff has been great, and the community has too. So the White Plains PTA also for the Highlands Middle School has been taking collections. And my email is on the website of Highlands. You can always reach out to me and we can figure out how you can give donations. But right now we're doing like a snowflake system where you would receive a snowflake with what a child would want, and you would drop that off to the school and we would get it over to the child. So it's been amazing to see how a community can come together during these really difficult times, and the smiles on faces of families that we delivered to. So we actually went out on a Friday afternoon and delivered packages to families to their door, and the appreciation was amazing. So it really is great what we're able to do.
And that kind of food delivery is happening all over by some of our parents who we know adults can't come into the buildings right now. So I don't want to highlight anybody, but parents are working in conjunction with our food banks to make sure that the food we're getting from Feeding Westchester is getting out into the community. With regard to special education and student services, we continue to look at the individual needs of children and identify students who need to come into school more often in collaboration with our building principals and our directors of special education. If anybody, I don't want to leave a building out. If you'd like to add anything, please feel free.
I can just chime in a little bit about the SEL committee at the high school. As with Highlands, we're in the process of thinking about how we might revamp our advisory a little bit too. The building level SEL committee actually sent out a survey to students to talk specifically about advisory and their specific needs, to get their input on how they think advisory might be utilized a little bit differently. We've also polled students to ask them if they feel like they have someone specific at the high school that they can reach out to if they need help. Any student that replied no to that is currently in the process of being contacted. We've also asked students if they know where they can go for help if they're in the building, like if they need help when they're here, where they can physically go. And those students that replied no, and we did have a few, are also in the process of being contacted. As with Highlands, our Key Club is working on a Toys for Tots drive, and our Midnight Run is working on a Stop and Shop gift card holiday drive. So we have lots going on here as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks everybody for all of those great efforts to support our families. Dr. Hand, good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to mention that we are working on bringing children back into school for additional days, and we met yesterday as a reopening subcommittee for curriculum and instruction. And I know that Ernie and Daisy and Emily wanted to share a bit, and I see that Laura's on too, so that we can cover all levels. So if we want to start with Daisy, maybe, is Daisy on? Maybe she's not. I don't see Daisy. Ernie?
Sure. So we met, and as we discussed yesterday, we have students who are struggling. We decided that we identified students who have failed 3 or more subjects the first marking period, and invited those students back. We asked our guidance counselors to call parents and see if they would agree to have those students come back 4 days a week. And for the most part, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Those students clearly needed the support. In fact, Mike had asked to share his screen, and he has this data, or some of this data, of parents who agreed.
So good morning. This is the data that we were able to get so far. So as you can see, overwhelming number of students, parents have decided to come back 4 days a week. Even with the cases rising, they realize that their child needs to be in school. So we had, 44 yeses and only 17 no's of keeping their kid where they are now. So with this support of these kids coming back, I think it will make a major change in these kids' lives.
Yeah, and for students who don't fall into that category, we also will be starting our after-school homework center and targeted support program next week. So we're trying to address everyone who needs, added supports in this environment.
Okay, so I'll certainly chime in here from the high school side. So we're also looking to invite back students that have been struggling during the first quarter. Same profile, had students that have failed 3 or more classes. So we're currently having that outreach happening this week. We're expecting them to start on Monday. So our house administrators are doing that outreach to families. I don't necessarily have the data like Mr. Eaton did, but
61, Mr. Martinez, 61 families have replied yes so far.
So we are at 61 with it's, but there are some that have chosen to keep their child out and again, we respect that, but, we do, stress that it's important to bring, these students back as many days as possible. So that being said, we're hopeful that most of them will accept our invite. We have run it through our student management system to make sure that we're within the capacity of our room, so that it should not be impacted either. So we've made sure that is the case. And I think that's where we are right now. We're certainly also starting our extended day program. So we do have quite a few families that have signed up, students that have signed up for that. And we're still exploring ways that we can try to, support students throughout the day. So I'm working with the coordinators to identify some opportunities during lunch periods and so on. So we're working through that as well.
Can I
Can
just?
I can chime in as well. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to chime into what Mr. Martinez was saying, just to reiterate, and I know everybody knows this is important, but every time we make a change to the number of students that we have in the building, it really does, because our high school is so large and complex, it really does require us to run a test run of the schedule to make sure that every classroom is not going to exceed capacity and that our cafeterias will still be okay. So whenever we make a change like this, right now with this, we've determined that it will be okay with this number of students that we've invited in.
And I would say the one other thing is that, this is we've shared with families that it is to the end of the second quarter. And we're going to constantly be looking at this, because we do recognize that, we anticipate that more of our hybrid students will probably start coming back when things get better in our early spring. So being hopeful, but so we want to be mindful of that as well.
And if I could quickly chime in, Dr. Ricker, if that's okay. At Rochambeau, we've been doing the same thing. Currently, we're about 30% of our student body that's on remote. We've been looking at the data, and anyone who's failing, even at just one course, we're trying to bring them back in. We've been successful bringing in some, but just like Mr. Martinez mentioned, there are some families that are, despite the fact that they realize that their child should be in person because of the pandemic concern with COVID-19, still opting to have their child do their best efforts at home. We are also on Wednesday afternoons during our half-day sessions, we're also trying to find creative ways to use our teaching assistants to work with students remotely that need additional assistance during those afternoons, as well as possibly having kids coming at that time too that can to get that one-on-one individual attention. So these are some of the efforts that are happening at Rochambeau, along with we'll be starting our extended day program too here as well. Thank you.
Great, great.
Thank you, Paul.
Just a question. I mean, by now, you know, I read the journal news. So one of the articles yesterday had to do with failing students all over the country. And that basically the number of failures in different schools seems to have, you know, doubled during the pandemic. So I was wondering if we were, you know, seeing those kinds of numbers. And I guess the other thing I wanted to ask is yesterday at our subcommittee meeting, it was mentioned that bringing students back for more days and more students has very much complicated contact tracing and the potential for much more exposure in the building. And I think maybe Ernie, you had an example of, you know, the kinds of numbers, you know, that could potentially be affected.
Sure. So on Friday of last week, we received a message from a parent that one of our students had tested positive. That was a student that had been brought back for 5 days. So it's an in-school IS5 student. So we went back and first of all, before I even describe this, I really need to thank Maggie Rasiopo and Sergio Alfonso, because they were, you know, invaluable in this process. And Maggie worked with us Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday, you know, to resolve this. So having said that, so we went back 48 hours, I'm sorry. So that meant that every class a student was in on Tuesday and Wednesday, along with, you know, his time in the cafeteria and anywhere else in the building where he was, you know, for any extended period of time, everyone had to be, you know, notified. So it turned out that he had interacted in a lengthy enough time with over 100 students and 34 staff members. So it seriously, you know, impacted the number of students and staff members that he was in contact with, the fact that we had brought this student back. So, you know, and that's why it's from, you know, for someone who's outside the school, it's hard to understand why, you know, why can you no longer, you know, run the school? Why do we have to dismiss at 11 o'clock on Friday? Well, the fact that we had 34 staff members that had to be sent home, okay, or were going to be quarantined, we didn't have enough coverage to provide adequate supervision to the students that were in the building. So, you know, that's where we stand right now. And that does absolutely complicate, you know, the whole contact tracing process.
So I think,
Mr. Spatafor, if I may ask, was the child symptomatic?
The child had gone home early on Thursday. So he was tested earlier in the week, and then he wasn't feeling well on Thursday and was sent home. So yes.
The child actually had a little bit of a cough and chest discomfort. So when dad came to pick him up, they both went to get tested and they were both positive.
so I just want to, I want to make sure that we don't drill down too much in individual cases of folks who unfortunately aren't feeling well, but I think it's a good point, Maggie, that cold symptoms, cough, chest congestion, aches, don't come to school. You know, unfortunately, you know, you can't make a determination that what you're experiencing when you wake up in the morning is a little bit of postnasal drip versus COVID-19. You just aren't able to do that. at home. And unfortunately, if you do, and this could be, adults or anybody, if you do interact with folks, you could end up unwittingly, certainly innocently, setting off a chain reaction that can have a rather disruptive, large impact moving forward. And I think, to the point that Mr. Spatafor was making, we understand the trade-off. We understand the trade-off with trying to bring more children back more often. We know, because we've seen it, that is going to increase the possibility that you have a child come in or is exposed. But we're trying, again, balance, right? Trying to balance that health safety standard with the educational needs of our children. So it's not perfect, right? Somebody might ask, well, why the children who are failing first? Why not the children who have straight A's first? We had to approach it and had to look who in our educational community is in dire straits, who needs. You imagine, I in my mind, I try to make connections that make sense to me. I imagine an emergency room or waiting room. There are going to be people who are going to be sitting in the waiting room for a little bit longer than others, right? Who come in with chest pains, and that you sort of have to kind of move through that process. So the goal is to get everybody back in, but as we're bringing in more children, certainly looking at the children who are really, really struggling right now. To Cheryl's point, that's happening nationwide. Trying to get them in as soon as possible, we know is going to be advantageous to them. And Cheryl, to your question, I think, yes, we have been seeing children who have been struggling. It's certainly not 100% more or something like that, but we absolutely have. And we've been taking care to try and really get to those families and support those families and to try and do whatever we can to help them.
And Joe, just to add some context, and again, not about invading anyone's privacy, but just for parents to understand that we are doing everything we can to bring children into the building as much as, buildings as much as possible, but that there are, real life, sort of ramifications to doing that. And there are trade-offs and balances. And we sometimes have parents asking questions. They want sort of very cut and dry criteria for when we have to close a school or when we have to, send somebody home or quarantine or whatever. And Ernie's example is just, again, the context of how complicated it can be. And there's no cut and dry answer, because it really depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great point too. There is absolutely no manual. Believe me, if there was, I'd be walking around with it and sharing it. But yeah, you really do have to weigh all of the circumstances in every particular decision. I see Mrs. Norfleet's hand up and Mrs. Vitale's hand up. Gina, good morning.
Good morning. I applaud everyone. Thank you so much for your efforts to bring more students in. I was just thinking that possibly maybe another way to access more children, and I know this isn't ultimately an academic way, but maybe at the high school level that we could start, bring back that conditioning program, have some, an A group, a B group, have it after school, outside only, weather permitting. I think the results of getting some of those children engaged would help them academically and socially. And I think that would make their school experience more fulfilled. So I was just trying to think about other ways to reach other children. The kids, in this weather, they'd be out there without a jacket. They can tolerate it. And I think it would be really great to make those connections for our kids too. So just throwing it out there, because I know in our buildings, by inviting these students back, we will be bursting at the seams, and that will be stressful for everyone if we do have more positives come up and closures. But let's take advantage of our wonderful campus and our resources and maybe get some kids out there for some conditioning. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. Ms. Vitale. Good morning, Suzette.
Good morning. I appreciate the district's efforts to get more kids in school, and I realize this is really, a difficult feat overall. And it's no big secret that I'm a proponent of kids being in school. But my question comes to, even when they're remote, multiple classes are being canceled. And so I guess it's how are we going to ensure that the classes are continuing at this point, whether they're, I get that when they're in school, people are quarantined, but it seems like at the high school level, I don't know what's happening at the elementary school level, but like kids can have as many as 3 or 4 core classes canceled in a day, even on days they're supposed to be remote. So is that being rectified by us going remote, or more teachers teaching from home? It just seems inconsistent on, some teachers teach from home when they're quarantined, others do not. I understand if teachers are sick that they shouldn't be teaching from home, but the goal is to have the children learning and, experiencing learning. So whether it's remote or in person, I just, want to know how we're addressing that.
So certainly I can, chime in here, Ms. Vitale. So clearly I think, there isn't one set answer, when it comes to, in terms of why sometimes the one teacher is teaching remotely and one isn't. I think you're correct when it comes to if they're quarantining, it's different than if they're sick. But I also think the reality is we are a big school, right? So we have, over 150, plus teachers, and we only have a handful of substitutes, right? So I think Mr. Vitale, you can tell me here, I think we probably have a handful, like no more than 10 to 15 substitutes in any given day. So that presents a challenge, because of the fact is that we've acknowledged that, substitutes tend to be retired folks, and a lot of them are just not wanting to engage in a high school setting right now. So we're certainly taking a hit in that aspect. And that's the unfortunate part. And we are certainly always trying to explore different ways that we can try to, support our students when it comes to, making sure that they have assignments and as well as being, teaching remotely. I think that it's just very difficult to identify that it's one key problem versus another. But certainly, I appreciate that feedback. And, it's always something that we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we support them. And I just had this conversation with our curriculum coordinators this past week about the importance of making sure that our teachers are communicating, when they're going to be out, with our families and students so that they know, because I have had that feedback and frustration of students coming in to the building and having 2 or 3 teachers that are not available for in-person learning. And as a result, they end up going to one of our common spaces, which is one thing we want to try to avoid, right? So that's certainly something that some of the work that we're still constantly doing.
But I guess if we do stay completely remote, will that reduce this, and will classes be more likely to occur on a regular basis?
I think, and Emily, if you don't mind, I think that we don't know the answer to that question. I think we absolutely, can't predict the circumstances in each individual situation. I think that's the hardest thing. So I'd love to be able to just kind of answer the question, but directly, but unless I knew the 3, 4, 6 classes and what they were and what was going on, I don't necessarily have that background information. I can tell you, going full remote certainly allows focus on one modality of instruction, but that's different than a question about the health of a particular instructor or what's going on in their circumstances in terms of an absence or a missed class. So we haven't really focused on thinking about going completely remote for a long period of time, because we really are committed to bringing our children into the facilities as often as we possibly can. We know how important that is. And I don't know that necessarily, moving to the full remote, has the impact on the classes that you're talking about.
Well, that's why. Are we tracking that? Are we tracking canceled classes, like these weeks that we do go remote, the week before Thanksgiving, now this week? Because, I totally appreciate bringing more kids to school, but if more kids are in school, but in spending more time in the cafeteria and the library and study halls as opposed to actually in class, are we achieving what we're really, working to towards achieving?
So one thing I'll just add real quickly, I think, what the challenges that we saw right before Thanksgiving, as I mentioned in the past, I mean, we were pretty high in our quarantine numbers. Our numbers were pretty high. I can tell you that right now, our current numbers in terms of, since then has been pretty consistent with what we would say would be a normal year. So I would say that right now what we're seeing is our normal type of absences. I think they're a little highlighted right now because of the platforms that we're using. Versus a year that it's a normal school year where teachers are out for lots of various reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see Mrs. Eller. Good morning. Morning,
Yes,
Rosemary.
good morning. Quick question, because I know we have other report outs to do. Joe, can you talk a little bit about the forms that are due to be filled out every morning for everyone coming into our facilities? Do we have good response with those? And also, if you could talk a little bit about sports and the status.
Sure. I think we definitely have much better response in terms of folks filling out the daily screeners. As we've progressed through the year, we've tightened up the screener itself. Now we have the app that is presently available if folks prefer to use the app, and that's for the teachers right now, and staff. I'm sorry, staff and faculty and staff right now. I think we have, we still have folks who don't, and that's always something. It's a challenge because it's another thing that we have to follow up on. But I'm happy to say that we have folks who are filling out the forms. I think with the issue that we're having now, and just calling it out again, is if there's someone in the home who is ill, doesn't feel well, even not ill, stuck in bed, but doesn't feel well, it really is imperative that individual, if an employee, not come into the facilities, or if a child not be sent into the facilities until we know for certain, until we know for sure that it's not COVID-19. That's the big piece that we're facing right now. With regard to athletics, Section 1 has pushed athletics to January 4th for the winter season to begin. I do know there still remain concerns with regard to the present increase we're seeing in the region and throughout the state, the number of positive cases and how that may impact athletics. But right now, Section 1 has still kind of set on the 4th of January. I believe they have another executive committee meeting before the winter recess, and if there's any changes, we'll definitely communicate them out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Dr. Rica, I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand because I'm driving.
Okay. No problem.
So I don't mean to be rude. Section 1 cleared off-season practices for fall sports. Why is that not cleared yet in our district?
Section 1 cleared off-season training and conditioning, and that's for all sports, not just for fall, for all sports. Our district has not engaged in that because we wanted to complete the fall season prior to bringing more children back in for conditioning or training. Again, you can imagine football, off-season football training is not football practice, right? It's speed work, it's agility work, it's strength conditioning, but it's not running plays or those types of things. Same with basketball.
Right.
No, I know.
That's my question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said yes. You're exactly the point. That's the question. Why hasn't that started since fall sports have stopped?
We fall sports just ended, and then of course we experienced a pretty dramatic increase in cases, and we think that it's probably best to wait until we get through this period of the season until we start with an undertaking like that at the moment. Because remember, if and when a case pops up in any of those scenarios, dependent upon the contact trace, that could end up impacting our ability to function in person academically, which, while as important as athletics is, particularly to me, I can't see that eclipsing the importance of being able to get into the buildings every day for instruction.
Right, but you did manage the soccer team having a couple positive cases, as well as the field hockey team having positive cases, and they both had productive seasons in their entirety. So I just want you to be mindful of what Gina Norfleet said. So I reiterate that. It's not about the team or the sport. It's about the children and their well-being. And we have a lot of children that aren't well, and they're making choices that will possibly hinder the rest of their lives right now because they don't have that community. They don't have structure, and they need it.
Yeah, you're not going to find disagreement from me. We have a lot of adults who aren't well. We have a lot of children who aren't well. If there's one thing that operating a public school district in a pandemic has taught me, is that whatever decision that you're making, there's always going to be another side of unintended consequences that you are unable to necessarily attend to. So, to your point, absolutely. And that's why community partnerships are so important. That's why parents and guardians seeking out additional supports outside, if they're able, is so important. That's why, organizing, and I know that many of our children have done these types of things, organizing community jogs and, all of those types of things, all of that, you're right, is absolutely important. If we can, and when we can, bring more children back together to be able to participate in strength and conditioning, to participate in off-season training, we'll absolutely do it. I don't disagree with you. I think it's critical for kids to be engaged in extracurricular athletic opportunities. It's just how can we do it and balance the need to operate the facilities. With regard to soccer and field hockey, we were fortunate that those situations, when they did impact the team's ability and the teams had to quarantine, they came out of quarantine, missed a game, but came out of quarantine, were able to participate in the playoffs, did great. And that's exactly why we held off in bringing in the training while the seasons were going on, so that in the off chance that the trainings crisscrossed with the athletes who were participating in a season, it didn't negatively impact their ability to complete their season successfully. So I agree.
Okay, I look forward to some movement there. And then just one last quick thing. Maggie referenced and Mr. Spatafor with the child that came in with symptoms. I feel like we need to over communicate. If you have any symptoms, you can't send your child, or you as a teacher can't come to school. And I feel like those messages are out there, but they're buried. Maybe during these few weeks of everyone being concerned with these spikes and cases rising, maybe a call out just saying that would be beneficial, or just an email that just speaks to that.
Ms. Biondi, we, this meeting included, right, as part of that call out, and we, as you probably know, we've sent a number of K-12 alerts and emails and messages to families. I think the challenge that you're experiencing, that we're all experiencing, and it's very frustrating, is, and you can imagine this, if the federal government can't get the word out for people to take the appropriate steps, it makes it really difficult for every other agency all the way throughout the nation down to your local, grocer, to get that word out effectively. I think it's out. I think people intuitively understand it. I think it's whether or not people are making the decision to follow the request, right? So again, not feeling well, just a little bit not feeling well, where you would normally just kind of pop a Dayquil and move forward, you can't. And that's where I think we're facing our challenges. But I agree with you, continuing to spread that message and continuing to get the message out in every form and facet that we can only be helpful. I don't think it can be harmful. Thank you.
Can I just share? Because I
Hey,
just
Dr.
want to
Han,
finish
yeah.
up. Thanks. I just wanted to mention that Dr. Rodriguez is doing the same as the secondary level, following that same pattern of looking at students that have failed 3 or more classes and inviting them to attend more days. She also has the targeted support program that's starting for the extended day, as well as a homework center. The homework center is open to any child that needs help with their homework or help with their schoolwork. The elementary principals and I, we meet every week. Next week, our focus is going to be on inviting more students into school, looking for criteria, and then also on mid-year assessments. The hot topics for elementary school right now, I met with a group of teachers and brought some feedback back to principals. We're going to be looking at, thinking about the March report cards, thinking about March parent-teacher conferences, and also thinking about the mid-year assessments and, trying our best to make sure that we streamline everything that we do so that we're maximizing the amount of instructional time that we provide to students, and that we also are understanding of the balance that teachers, the balance that teachers have in this hybrid learning environment. At the secondary level, we're thinking about midterm exams and final exams and considering, if we need to rethink those. Again, the midterm week takes instructional time away from the students up at the secondary level. And also that assessment in this environment, it's hard to be sure, it's difficult to be sure that we have that level of consistency and integrity, considering that every learning environment is different. We have children at home, we have children in school, and just making sure that there's a standardization to the administration of any kind of assessment. So thinking about ways of rethinking what a final assessment might look like and, where we are with midterms. So we'll be sharing that out shortly. Last Wednesday, we had a lot of professional development going on in the afternoon. We had professional development on using the features of Zoom for student engagement, Play Post-it for student engagement, Play Posit for student engagement, Flipgrid for student reflection and assessment, as well as Flipgrid mixtapes. And I want to give a shout out to Rocco Verullo, who is our coordinator for instructional technology. He put together a really well received device use, professional development, if you will. Now that our teachers have really honed their skills in creating this kind of studio approach to a hybrid teaching model, they shared ways of using the desktop, the iPads using a tripod, snowball microphones, of course, your camera. A lot of teachers really prefer now to use 2 monitors. They really think that having the 2 monitors is very helpful. So one monitor can really help a teacher see every child that's at home. And then the second monitor, as well as the whiteboard, is used to present content and then to engage students. So I'm excited to share that. We'll also be doing that for the elementary teachers. Rocco's not on this call, but I think there were about 73 staff members that attended the professional development. And I just want to give a little, shout out to our curriculum coordinators as well, because they had department meetings and they also planned their own professional development within that Wednesday. So I just wanted to share a little bit about, the inside of what's going on in the school buildings. I know that we're really interested in getting more students into the buildings, but we also have to work really hard on the instructional piece and the curriculum piece. And I just want to thank everybody for your support.
Debbie, do you mind if I just jump in for a second to talk about the extended?
Yeah, sure, Jennifer.
program?
Just talk a little bit louder
Oh, I'm
because
sorry.
your mic is low.
My mic is low. Is that better or not better? Okay.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to share that we've now had the elementary extended day program up and running for about 3 full weeks, and it has been very successful so far. One of our concerns was whether or not our students could tolerate another hour on Zoom at the end of the day between 4:30 and 5:30, which is typically when that instruction is taking place. But the children have been really enjoying it. The teachers have been enjoying their time with the students. And I think the piece that is so critical is that we are making those one-on-one connections between teachers and children in a small group environment. And when you are teaching remotely, that is really key. So just building relationships working towards skills, having a small group that knows they're going to meet together twice a week has been very positive. So I just wanted to share that that model is working, and we hope that we'll be able to continue expanding that if we can get some more teachers who are interested in participating. So we will be reaching out again through a posting to see if we can get even more teachers involved for the second session, which will start in February.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Rocco, as well. And everybody who's working so hard on our curriculum instruction end. Really appreciate it. Dr. Karataish.
Good
Morning, Ann.
Good morning. The operations subcommittee is meeting this Friday, but we continue to focus and work on getting set for testing. So if there are any questions for any of the operational departments or anything anybody from operations want to update the committee on, please feel free.
I just have two, well, really more than two. I was fortunate to be able to give a presentation to the Finance and Audit Committee on Monday evening, and we reviewed our draft tentative long-range plan and fiscal outlook. And they weren't there to hear it, but I do want to just take this opportunity to thank Ed and Frank and Maggie and Sergio, Sean and Christina, and Ron for all of their hard work and all of the members and their departments' hard work. You know, since the beginning of the pandemic, the operations team members have just, they've never wavered. They've been with us. They've been out there. They've been connecting and supporting our kids and our community and our families. And just please know that we were singing your praise. Maybe your ears were ringing, and it wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing. Singing your praises on Monday evening, because if there's one thing we can't lose track of during the course of all this frustration, uncertainty, aggravation, disruption, is that there are a lot of really amazing human beings doing really amazing things every day. And they're doing it. They're thinking about new ways to do it, and they're looking for, you know, better ways to do it every day. So you folks are all part of that effort, and just know that the committee was really appreciative. Not so much appreciative for my 84 slide presentation, but very appreciative for all of your hard work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rico. They all appreciate it, and they do work so hard and nonstop. You know, we're working on the weekends, we're talking, figuring it out. So thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. As always, we'll post this so that everyone in our community can get an inside look at the work that we've been doing. We'll meet again next week, same time, same place. 11:30 today. We'll see if we have additional information with regard to how the state is progressing with the microcluster strategy. And certainly if there's any information that directly impacts us, we'll get it out there. We'll continue to stress and make sure that folks understand how important it is that they're taking into consideration their daily health checks before they're coming into the buildings, and continue to spread that message, as well as look for ways in the future to not only bring more children back into school, but also engage children in opportunities for play and training and just getting out and running around a little bit. Really do appreciate everybody's insight and their feedback. Also making sure we're following up and if there are going to be substitute teachers, or if we need subs or classes are missed, that we're communicating effectively with that too. I really do appreciate all of your time. And for those, again, who are going to be beginning the celebration tomorrow evening, happy Hanukkah. And we'll see you next week. Stay safe, everybody.
Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.